Okay, kids, so we are under this quarter moon, and our illustrious 45 has managed to insult the entire G7 group because, it's always good to insult the few people that are left that actually want to deal with you. Wow. I'm telling you, he's unraveling. If this is not proof that this man is unraveling, I don't know what you guys need, seriously. So, with that said, he manages to piss off the entire group of G7 members. He insults the PM of Canada, publicly insults him, and on Twitter no less. Like, what are you, a 12-year-old? Anyway, and now is flying into Singapore. So one of the interesting things that you can do with astrology is, because we're measuring time and mapping events, right? Is that you can make a prognosis, which is another word for prediction, but a little bit different. You can make a prognosis for how a trip is going to go by looking at the time you actually go on the trip, or the time you actually arrive. So the time you start a trip should give you an overall view of how the whole experience is going to go. But the time you actually arrive in a location should tell you everything, or a lot of things, about your experience in that location. So we have, God bless the internet, we have the time for 45 landing in Singapore at about 8:20, give or take a couple of minutes. They're not real specific. Obviously, I guess they're trying to keep the low profile terrorists and all this sort of stuff. Although at this point he is literally more of a danger to himself than anybody else will ever be. Anyway, so we've got it at 8:20. So I set the time for 8:25 Singapore time for the airport, and I cannot pronounce the name of the location where the plane landed, so I can't give that to you. But with that said, we're going to take a look at the chart for his trip and his experience while he's in Singapore. So the first thing is that we see, it's like right there in your face, there's two things that are going to make this an incredibly frustrating and not happy trip for him. So the first thing is at touchdown, when he lands in Singapore, which describes the trip as he is there, Saturn is on the ascendant. So it's either in the first house on the ascendant, or it's just behind the ascendant. But either way, Saturn on the ascendant on the chart for a trip indicates delays, frustrations, a lot of effort that gets put into doing pretty much everything. And also, if Saturn is in fact behind the ascendant and they arrived a little later than 8:25, pushing that Saturn further back in the 12th house, there's a lot of pressure that's coming down on him to perform under this trip. Now, with that said, we also have the Moon and Uranus together, Moon-Uranus conjunction, in the 4th house. So this typically indicates that the domicile, the place that we're staying, is uncomfortable or full of awkwardness and potential threats, and just not a great experience unless you're a thrill seeker. So it's interesting as far as what that describes. Given that he's in Singapore, it's probably one of the safest places you can be on the earth. But that may be it. We're also talking about one of the most strict places on earth where you can literally go to prison for littering. So, and given his propensity to be vulgar and eschew social rules and etiquette, I would not be surprised if the big threat for him is literally his own behavior. So now the upside to this is that Moon-Uranus conjunction is trining Saturn on the ascendant. So there is some measure of restraint and discipline that is involved here around this trip. So he may actually behave himself. Now, here's the thing. The other thing that's really big in this chart is there's a Mars North-South node conjunction making a T-square to that Moon-Uranus and that Jupiter in Scorpio. This is not good. This also gives indication, because of the planets involved, that this whole trip may end up costing him money, and more specifically real estate. So he may end up having to give up real estate as a result of this trip. I'm not sure what that is, and time will tell. We'll find out, pretty quickly what that's all about. But there are financial losses involved in this trip for him, and it may be financial losses that have a lot to do with giving up, separating, or divorcing himself from physical real estate holdings. And I don't know what that has to do with meeting the leader of North Korea, but it's there. So we'll see. We'll see what that is. Now, the other thing that we look at is the sun. So the sun and the moon are very important in the chart. And the sun rules our vitality and our physical presence in the world, and the moon represents our comfort. So with the moon conjunct Uranus, he's not going to be comfortable in Singapore. With the moon conjunct Uranus trining Saturn, there's a lot of restraint and discipline around this, and maybe that's why he's not comfortable. But also, Saturn represents some severity and leanness, Spartan. So a lot of the comfort that he may be accustomed to, he will not have at his disposal in Singapore. And this is relative to your own perspective. So if this were your chart and you were touching base and starting a trip with a Moon-Uranus conjunction, trining Saturn across the ascendant, what this would mean is for you, whatever your level of creature comforts that you're accustomed to may not necessarily be there. So it's going to be a very Spartan kind of experience for you, utilitarian. There's not a lot of physical comfort there because Saturn is not comfortable. Even though Saturn is in its own sign, let me get this phone here. Sorry. Hey! Even though Saturn's in its own sign in rulership, we're not necessarily looking at that specifically, and it doesn't really help. Saturn in its rulership means that you're comfortable, or you should be comfortable, dealing with the most frugal way of doing things. So, and then of course the Moon Uranus, this physical, just being uncomfortable, emotionally uncomfortable, psychologically uncomfortable, not feeling safe. So if this were you with a Moon Uranus conjunction trining Saturn, even though it's a trine, which is a good aspect, what this describes is an environment and a situation where you just can't rest because you don't feel safe and you don't feel supported. Now, the sun represents our physical essence or our physical presence in an environment. So, and also our vitality, right? So the sun in this chart is in the 6th house. So, and the 6th house is the house of health and habits and hygiene. With the sun in the 6th, it's a weak house. It's in this particular type of chart, when you look at the chart this way, which is different from a natal chart, your birth chart, these are very different ways of applying things. Because it's kind of like milk. Like you can use milk to drink, you can use milk to make sour cream with, you can use milk to make butter with, you can use milk to make buttermilk with. Like milk is milk, but the way you use it makes very different outcomes. So the same thing with the chart. So in this particular type of chart, the sun in a 6th house is not a great place to have it. If anything, what it does is it weakens the physical expression, it weakens the vitality, it makes us very physically disadvantaged, and also it makes us socially disadvantaged. The sun is your source of power. So with the sun in a weak house, what that also does is it weakens your power in your environment in this situation. So with him being in Singapore right now, this is not an environment or a situation or a time where he is at his most advantageous in terms of his power and his ability to have influence. And it's also not his the best environment or timing for him in terms of his physical health. So he's not going to be loving this trip at all. The other thing, when you look at a trip, the other thing to look at, because you got 12 houses to work with here and 10 planets, right? Like, oh my God, that's a lot of information. The next thing you look at is, what is the purpose of the trip, right? So, and the ruler of the house that indicates the purpose of the trip should give us some information about how well that's going to go. Will this be a successful trip? I mean, obviously, if you're going on your second honeymoon, right? And the entire time you're on your second honeymoon, your spouse is doing business deals and are ignoring you. The trip was not successful for you because that was not your purpose for the trip. Even though he may have landed a huge account and this would be very successful for him. Okay, this will be very successful for him in terms of work. That was not the purpose of the trip. Therefore, the trip was not successful. So, what was the purpose of the trip? Well, the purpose of this trip, remember, it's about diplomacy and relationships and alliances, right? So for that, what house do we go to, kids? I'll give you 2 seconds to answer it. Ready? Right, the 7th house. In this chart, the ruler of the 7th house is, oh boy, here we go, the moon. That same moon that is conjunct Uranus down in that 4th house, which is the end of the matter. That same moon conjunct Uranus, which is trining Saturn, but not necessarily helping. that same moon Uranus that is in a T-square with Jupiter and the Mars and South Node conjunction in the second house. This trip is going to cost him money, and the diplomacy that he's looking for, what we want to see for a successful outcome in terms of diplomacy and relationships and alliances, is we want to see favorable aspects with the moon and pretty much anything. We'll take anything at this point, right? So the moon, even though it's conjuncting wacko Uranus, is trining Saturn, okay, which is the first house ruler. So we have the first and seventh house ruler in a trine aspect with each other in angular houses. So this indicates that there is some level of, I agree, Suzanne, but I think his zoo handlers are with him. And also, he just finished pissing off the G7 and getting spanked, like literally by the globe, the entire freaking planet. So I think there's a little bit more restraint, but I don't know, like he's unraveling. He's literally unraveling. Jesus. Okay, so the seventh house ruler and the first house ruler for the trip are coming together in a trine. This indicates that on a level of diplomacy, or coming to some type of agreement, even if it's this whole agree to disagree kind of position, that will be successful. But the caveat is that the moon Uranus is in a T-square. This is a horrible, horrible aspect to have to deal with on a trip. And the leg of the T-square is the Mars and the South Node, for God's sakes. Oh my God. So from here, we would go in and we would look at what else this involves. Now, Mars in this chart rules Aries, okay? And Aries is the fourth house. Real estate, your power base, your home, your country, all right? So the moon and the South Node together, that is a point of loss or cost for diplomacy for this particular trip. So, South nodes in the sun orbit or Mars are linked or no. Okay, so the nodes, bear with me. I'm trying to do this in a hurry. So, let me finish this and we'll come back to that. All right. So, this is going to be a very expensive trip. And if not to him personally, then to us as a country. This is not great. This is not a great trip. But ultimately, in terms of his trip, because remember, we're setting this up for the time he arrived in Singapore. We're not setting this up for the time Kim Jong-un or Kim Jong-il, Kim. We're not setting up for the time he arrived in Singapore. And we're not setting up for the time those two actually met face-to-face at the summit. So a first meeting chart is a very different thing than the chart for a trip. This trip is going to cost 45 a lot more than he realizes. So who else is going to take on that cost with him? That's a whole other conversation. But I can tell you, like on the surface, it'll look okay. So there's this kind of stalemate, like even keel they're going to reach with each other, but Uranus is involved. So at best, it's going to be more of what we've seen before with North Korea, which is this kind of uneasy tension where we're just kind of holding it together to keep the skin on the milk, like on the surface. But at any minute, like it could get ripped off, and you got milk boiling over everywhere, scalding everything. So we'll see how that goes. So this is for him. There's more here, and if you want to actually see the chart and watch the video as we kind of go through this and we talk about how to read the chart for a trip, that video will be made and posted on my Patreon page. So if you're not a member, it's only $1 a month. You might want to consider being a member because that will be exclusive to my patrons who are on Patreon. Also, I will have a podcast of the video for those of you who like to listen while you're driving or working out, so you don't have to have the video in front of you. And that's it. So if you guys have any questions, now is the time to ask because I'm about to sign off. Let's see. All right, south nodes and the sun orbit or Mars are linked. No. It's ask me now while you've got my attention and I'm still like awake and moving. Right, that is a technical question and I don't have that answer. I'm not a huge fan of astronomy, so I don't have an answer for that, and I apologize. So if somebody out there is an astronomy fan, which is not likely if they're reading astrology videos or watching astrology videos, but there's that. I wouldn't worry about it. So the thing about eclipses, no, well, Alyssa, what I'm not completely sure, but it sounds like you're asking a technical question, which is more to do with the mathematical. Oops, sorry. Which has more to do with the mathematical orbs of the planets, and that is an eclipse. Do not panic. It's not the end of the world. Honest, it's not. Trump is still here, and he was born under an eclipse, so clearly it's not the end of the world or somebody's life. However, with eclipses, they do tend to herald, like all things, they tend to herald big changes. Because it involves your personal sun, right? One of the things that you can look for under an eclipse is a radical shift or change in your identity. Now, the thing with this is simply, if you pursue the changes on your own, if you make it a point to work on your own self-transformation, that will be a much easier transition to make. If you try to hang on to an old identity and you make every effort to not change something about yourself or improve something about yourself. My son was born on Friday the 13th. If you're trying to avoid making changes or improvements to yourself, the eclipses are going to be a lot more disruptive. Because the eclipses, all of these planetary patterns, it's a lot like swimming, if you guys are familiar with swimming out in the ocean, right? So if you're swimming in the ocean and you're trying to swim against the waves and you're trying to swim against the tide, you're going to have, or even against the current, you're going to have a heck of a time getting where you need to go, and you're going to get resistance the entire way. If you swim with the current, if you let the current and the waves like move in the direction you're trying to move and you go with it, you'll find that not only are you not struggling so much, but the other thing is that you end up getting where you really wanted to go a lot faster and easier anyway, right? So that's kind of the thing with your planetary transits, and the eclipse are like big waves that are moving you, and it has everything to do with identity, like who we are. So if you're having a birthday on an eclipse, it's very much about an identity change. And yeah, well, listen, we're going to talk about Russia in a second. All right, so I don't agree that lunar and solar eclipses are specific to genders. I don't think it in your personal chart, I don't think it has anything to do with that. No, so don't worry about it. Like, the solar and lunar eclipses are going to impact you, but you're not going to feel one more strongly than the other just because you have ovaries or gonads. Like, if you're feeling an eclipse more strongly than the other, it's not because of the masculine feminine lunation, it's because of the exact proximity to something in your chart. All right. He wants to open up Russia for business. Does this chart intersect with Russia's chart or Putin's chart? That is a phenomenal question. And let me tell you, Papa Putin has got Kim Jong-un in his pocket. All right? Kim Jong-un is like the bad little brother that's kind of slow and a little weird, but the big brother like looks out for him, right? So the thing that people don't realize is, North Korea obviously is a communist country. Duh. Right? So is Russia, or it used to be. Duh. Like, no surprises there. Did you know that there are actually a couple of cities in Russia? It's all Korean people. All Korean people. Because there was an agreement between North Korea and Russia years ago where some of the North Koreans could emigrate to Russia and take up residence there. So they literally, and they don't intermarry with anybody else. The Russians are very xenophobic. They don't like foreigners. Right? Literally, they don't like foreigners. And it doesn't matter about your race. You're a foreigner. You can't be trusted. The only reason we see so many Russians over here is because typically the women that come over here are the women who can't get husbands over there. Swear to God. It's a weird culture thing about having a man. And there's a man shortage. And the men that they do have, there's a high alcoholism rate among them. Huge problems over there. Anyway, there's entire cities in Russia that are just Korean. So Russia and North Korea are like this. They're like kissing cousins, okay? So you can bet your sweet bippy that Kim Jong-un has a protector / big brother in Papa Putin, okay? So if Kim Jong-un is going to this meeting at all, it's because he has to. He has to. And if he's doing that, it's only because Putin's pressuring him. And if Putin is pressuring him, and we know 45 is in Putin's pocket. Putin has got something on this guy. So we also know that Putin is doing 45 a favor because he wants something. Nobody does anything without wanting something back. Yeah, there's a whole lot of shady nonsense going on. It's not good. It's not good. And, you know, but we could go on for hours about this. So I don't know about them opening up Russia for business, but it would make sense. It would make sense. They're really trying it. And Russia is a changing economy. Russia's been a changing economy for the last 10 or 15 years. So literally in Russia right now, the division of wealth is like here, only more extreme. So you have like a handful of people that are billionaires, right? And then everybody else is poor as dirt. Like they don't even have sidewalks in these places. It's all dirt paths. I'm not kidding. I was there. It's crazy. Anyway, but that's a great suggestion. I will look at that. I will take a look at Putin's chart if I can find it. And I will certainly look at the country, the Soviet Union, try to find their chart. But, you know, so there may be some ties there, but there may not be. You know, I mean, ultimately, this is very much about Trump and his alliances with the Russians and the Russian mob. And here's something you guys need to think about as well. And I want you to do your research. So go online and look for back articles on Ivana Trump, the first wife. All right. There's an article in one of the major magazines that talked about Ivana Trump and how she met Donald and their marriage and this, that, and the other thing, and their businesses together. And here's the thing. If you read the article and you do your history and you do your research, here's what becomes obvious. One, Trump was a struggling real estate mogul when he met Ivana. It wasn't until after he met Ivana that his business took off and his wealth increased, because Ivana took care of business. Ivana was the business brains behind that relationship. Trump was the car salesman. Ivana was she was literally the machine that made things work and saw the deals and made sure shit got done and looked for the opportunities. Ivana was the one running that ship. And did you know Ivana speaks fluent Russian? New York real estate developer, wife who speaks fluent Russian, who's got an incredible business head. You, on the other hand, are just a used car salesman, right? And, let me see. Russian money in New York City. Is that possible? I don't know. Well, she speaks a few languages, but the fact that she speaks fluent Russian is very important. Russian is one of the hardest languages in the world to learn, next to Chinese and English. So if you can speak fluent Russian, that's a very big deal. And also, you're not going to speak fluent Russian unless you're spending a lot of time with the Russians, like a lot of time with the Russians. So go do your research and look up Ivana Trump and her relationship with Donald, when she met him, what happened after they got married, how they ran their businesses. I'm telling you, Ivana is the reason that man has any money at all. He's an imbecile. Right. And, you know, the thing about, and I'm going to do that chart on my Patreon page as well, but there's a way to turn a chart to see your marriage partner. So if you want to know who somebody is in life, look at who they marry. Okay. So I do not for a minute believe that Trump was born with 29 Leo rising. And there are things in his chart, if you turn the wheel to describe the marriage partners, he's not 29 Leo rising. He's 2 Virgo rising or 1 Virgo rising. All right. And Marla Maples and that marriage is the key to unlocking that. Anyway, Ivana would be represented as the first marriage on the 7th house. And if she is a Pisces, if Pisces is on his 7th, as I believe it is, Neptune rules the 7th house of the first marriage partner. All right. And a Neptunian wife, that Piscean wife, okay, is always going to defer to her man. And Ivana is very old-fashioned European. So no matter how smart she is, no matter how much on top of things she is, no matter how much of the actual boss she is, she's always going to soft shoe her way around her husband and make it look like this is all her husband's idea. It's all her husband's efforts. It's all her husband's brains. She will never usurp his spotlight. Even though the reality is she is the engine that drives the train. Without her, he's nothing. And if you notice, since she divorced him, he's gone through Marla Maples. That marriage lasted, 2 years? She was literally a gold-digging idiot, right? And then the next one, is this Xanax-popping piggy bank. You know, he uses as a prop to confirm to the world he's actually heterosexual. And the other thing is, if you turn the chart, one of the other things that shows up is the kid. If you look at I'm telling you, that man is not Leo rising. If you look at the chart and he is in fact 1 or 2 Virgo rising, there's a strong indication that his biological child, barren, not the other 3, but the 4th child would have some type of learning disability. And I went back and I looked up barren and all sorts of stuff, and apparently there's some suspicion that he may be autistic because of the school they're choosing to send him. But this only pops up if he's 1 or 2 Virgo rising. I'm telling you, he's not 29 Leo rising. So here's the thing, right? Ivana speaks fluent Russian. Ivana is the brains in that relationship. Ivana is the reason he's made all the money he has. And I'm going to tell you, I bet you that it's because of her organizing meetings with Russian money in New York, right? New York real estate is astronomically valuable, okay? And if Ivana speaks fluent Russian, and Ivana is in contact with her daughter, who happens to be in and out of the White House as pretty as you please whenever she wants because she is her daddy's right hand, right? How difficult would it be if you can't go to him directly to get a message to the ex-wife, who then talks to the daughter, who then talks to the father? Because nobody's going to think twice about Ivana talking to her daughter, right? So, and you can't patrol Ivana everywhere she goes. I'm telling you. So, old money from Russia, like old Russian ties with this guy all the way back to Ivana. This is not new. So this whole Russian campaign conspiracy, this is not a new relationship. I'm going to bet you 10 to 1. It's the money, the handful of money people in Russia, the business people, that had a relationship with him early on that are also got behind him to bet on this horse in this race. Oh, sorry. So, my friends, do your research. It's interesting reading. Go back and look for history with Ivana Trump and see like about their relationship and the money. Yeah. I'm telling you, Ivana is the key here. Melania is a freaking zombie, man. I don't know how much freaking Xanax that chick is popping, but you know, she's out of it. But again, she speaks fluent Russian as well, so she's another tie or form of another messenger to the prince, the little Lord Fauntleroy in office. Okay, so anyway, let's get back to this, and then I'm going to sign off. So you can time how a trip is going to go by looking at when you actually arrive at your place. And again, the success or failure of a trip has everything to do with the purpose of the trip. Well, remember, the last thing anybody wants to do is get a large group of people in a panic, because then you have mobs and riots. And the last thing you want to do is get, especially with these whack jobs running around with firearms and assault rifles, the last thing you want to do is get the American public in a panic, because then you'll have all these NRA supporters running around shooting up everybody because, you know, woo, right? Oh my God. Yeah. You don't piss off the people with guns, right? And you, more than that, you don't send them into a panic. Oh my God. So there's a lot we don't know, and it's for good reason, because the last thing we need is the entire country going into a blind panic. Well, it doesn't have to be bad. We can get through this, but we have to stay on top of it. We have to stay awake, and we have to pay attention. We have to pay attention. And for those of us who are light workers, we have to do our mind magic. So listen, while we're visualizing, you know, a new car and a salary increase and the love of our life, you know, and you know, our weight down to our perfect size, we also need to be visualizing us getting through this and the entire planet getting through this to the next level with as little trauma as possible. So that's our job as light workers, doing our mental magic with our visualization. So we got to stay, listen, eye on the prize, eyes on the prize. We have got to stay focused on the ultimate best outcome with the least amount of trauma in the process of getting there. So if you're interested in learning how to, or how delineating this even further, I will have this on my Patreon page, and I will have other fun stuff on the Patreon page, and there will be podcasts for those of you who like to tune in and listen because you can't watch videos and drive or exercise. That will be on the Patreon page as well. Remember, it's $1 a month to support your local favorite astrologer so that I can keep making fun stuff for you guys. And also too, still have a couple of openings, so if you guys are looking for a way to get a little bit of personal cheerleading in, because you're working through something or you need a little bit of boost, I've got a video about that somewhere. I'll put it in the comments below when I find it again. That is also available, but only to Patreon subscribers. It's $1 a month, honey. It's $1 a month. It's $12 a year. We spend more than that on coffee around here. All right, so that is it, my friends. That is it. So let's hope that he does not blow this. He should be okay. Like I said, I think the zookeepers, his handlers have a good handle on him now, because he really dropped the ball with the G7 group. Oh my God, oh my God. I'm so tired of saying, I never saw this coming. I'm so tired of saying that. So tired of saying that. And I'm an astrologer. So we're going to end this here. I really have to go be productive. You guys are awesome. You guys are awesome. And you know why you're awesome? Because you're light workers and you know how to do mind magic. And all of us together, as long as we stay on top of this and we keep visualizing the better outcome, and we keep visualizing getting through this with the least amount of trauma possible, we can save everybody from worst possible case scenarios. So we get to be superheroes, and we get to do it very quietly behind the scenes by using our minds and visualizing this. So, and that's why I think you guys are awesome. All right, so now I'm really gonna go. Bye.